Hey everybody, Jake here from Bearded Gear, and I've got another review to do for you on a Spyderco that I owned but no longer own. And thanks to the Cut Club, I have one in my possession. It's about to get mailed back out. I've got to get this box in the mail. But while it's here, I wanted to do a review on the Smock because I owned one for a good while. I had it for at least a few months, probably like 6 months, and I carried it quite a bit when I did. It was one of my favorite knives to carry around and use because we'll get to a lot of reasons. But first of all, it's pretty slim this way, so in pocket it's very comfortable. Especially I had a deep carry lynch clip on mine and that made it even better. But also I like fidgety knives. If you know me at all, you already know that. So this knife, because it's a button lock and because there's multiple methods of deployment, i.e. a flipper and a Spidey hole, which is my favorite opening method, it's just a dream to play with. Now, one thing I'll say right off the bat that is different about this one, other than the clip, which I already mentioned, is this one has the secondary detent still in it. This isn't my knife, this is a loaner in the Cut Club box, so it's not like I'm going to disassemble this knife and pull that secondary detent ball out. On mine, I knew because I had watched a few videos on it before I got mine. I got it when the knife first came out. And when I got it, I knew the second I got it, I wanted to pull that secondary detent ball out. So that's what I did. I flipped it 2 or 3 times, and then I disassembled it, I pulled it out, and it was, in my opinion, way, way better. The advantages to the secondary detent ball in this are that it won't shake open. It's a more solid lockup when it's closed. And other than that, I guess if you're someone who doesn't like drop shuttiness, it's less drop shutty without that. Even pressing the button, like if I press the button on mine, like I am, you can't see it because it's on this side, but if I did it like this, the blade would have free fallen out and swiveled. Here it's just got a little bit of tension to it. So to me, the way I enjoy button locks is to be able to just kind of free swing them around, right? And this one will still do that, kind of. You just have to give it some wrist and stuff. The one I had, it was like gravity did all the work. You just let physics play their own game, and it was super fun. So this one, I enjoy a lot less than the one I actually owned. If I were to get another one, it would be an easy fix again. I disassemble it, pull that little ball out. It's a little spring-loaded ball in there. You pull out the ball in the spring. I put it in a baggie, and I left it there until I sold the knife. And I sent it to the guy, and I asked him I guess it was actually a trade. When I traded with the dude, I let him know, hey, the detent ball is out of it right now. Do you want me to put it back in or just send it separate? And he's like, no, leave it out. Because he was smart, too. So in my opinion, if you're going to get one of these knives, that's the way to go, is to remove that secondary detent ball, because it just gets so much more fun to play with. The only reason I can see not putting it in, realistically, is if you can't stand it when a knife can shake out. Because that, on mine, it could shake out. Did it ever come open in my pocket, or was it the type of thing where I had issues with that? No, it never hurt me because it was able to shake out when I did that. And so take that for what it's worth. But the Smock in general is a really interesting knife. Obviously it's a collaboration between Smock Knives and Spyderco. So it's a Spyderco production version of one of Smock's customs. I think it's like the SK23 or something. Don't hold me to that. But he makes these button lock knives that look just like this. The difference is this one has a Spidey hole and it's made by Spyderco, right? So construction-wise, we've got stainless steel liners and a compression lock, basically, but it's essentially, if you've seen my Blades We Love PM2 Ultra videos, this is what Blades We Love did to accommodate making a button lock PM2, because this is a compression lock that functions in reverse, so like a lefty compression lock, and then it's got this like round bar stock button that's basically drilled onto it or screwed onto it, and they've made a hole so that it can pass through the scale here, and that allows you to press down and push the compression lock from this side without having to like have a cutout in the scale. And it would be if you made a little cut here where the button is, like cut a groove out of there like you see on a PM2 or a Para 3 on the opposite side, and you took that little button off, this would work as a lefty compression lock. That's really what the mechanism is inside. So stainless steel liners, funky compression lock to make it a button lock, and then we are riding on, it should be bearings. I'm 99% certain it's bearings. Yeah, we're on ball bearings here, and we've got 2 detents, as I mentioned. We've got some barrel spacers and a lanyard tube, and we have the flipper here, which works great, and then we have the Spidey hole, which also works great. And the blade steel on these is CPM S30V. There's been one exclusive that came from Knife Joy that was in 20 CV and smooth G10. This one is the more standard version, or the standard version. So it's, if you've watched my recent Watu review, you'll know I'm not crazy about this handle scale material, because what it is black G10 that has a layer, like one sheet of carbon fiber laid on top of it, and then it's like a peel ply finish beyond that. So it's a little bit kind of like the checkered grittiness, but much less gritty than would be on like a PM2 or Para 3. It's got this almost like snakeskin sensation to it, where you can kind of feel the waviness of the carbon sheet that's on top of the G10. I don't know. I would rather have G10 or carbon fiber. I don't necessarily understand the benefit of mixing the two and putting a layer of carbon on top of it. It just doesn't do anything for me. But there are a lot at this point I've seen recently of aftermarket scale options, especially now that there's been an exclusive. I assume there will be more exclusives, maybe some sprints of this knife, and so it's done very well for Spyderco. They still seem to like sell out at a lot of places when I see them get them in stock. I don't know how simple it is to just buy one, but it's much easier than when they came out. They were like impossible to get for a while, and distributors would get a little wave of them and they'd sell out real quick again, and then it was a couple months until people got more, and now it seems to be more leveled out than that. Anyway, that's our construction. This knife, it's not particularly lightweight, it's not particularly heavy either. I feel like for its size, it's a fair weight. It feels substantial in the hand. One thing that a lot of people I hear complain about this knife is the ergos. The way that it's designed to be gripped, as best as I can tell, is to put your foremost finger here into this groove, right? And then you've got this spot back here to put the rest of your fingers. For me, in this grip, it's actually quite comfortable. The jimping is much sharper than I like, I will say that, but it's not terrible. And ultimately, in this grip, it feels pretty good. But then you've got this weird gap, right, where there's a flat of the handle that you could choke up onto, and that's also fairly comfortable, but that's not really, it doesn't seem to me like that's where you're designed to hold on based on where the grooves are. And then you've got this spot up here, which you can kind of use as a forward finger choil, but isn't really a forward finger choil. At least it's not a comfortable one. I don't know, it's just an interesting handle shape. And that choil, part of why it's so big is because it has to be in order to fit around the button lock in here, because that button rides all the way down here. So when the edge terminates, it has to terminate all the way up here. If that button lock wasn't there and this was just a liner lock with a flipper, you could have edge all the way up to here, which would mean it would come back to here, right? It's just you're playing with angles and components, so they have to have that cutout there. But it makes the edge and the profile of the blade kind of interesting because it's got that cutout there. It's just a kind of a giant choil. The blade shape, I will say, however, is very functional. It's a hollow grind, and it gets really thin behind the edge. When I had mine, I remember specifically there was one time that I got a splinter in my finger, and this was the knife that I picked to get the splinter out, because the tip on this knife is just, it's really precise, and it's so thin behind the edge that I stand by that decision to use this one for that task. It was excellent for it. And the edge that comes on it is fantastic. Taichung does a great job at putting edges on knives, in my experience. And it's a really functional blade. It's just a little interesting when you're in this grip because it's so far out from where your hand is. I'm much more accustomed, if I've got this much blade length and my hand is here, I'm used to the blade being right here. And instead it's all moved forward. So there is this tendency that I had when cutting like cardboard and stuff. Usually I want the cardboard to be right about here, like just in front of where my thumb lands, so I'm pushing through it. And here, you're playing with a different angle, or a different placement, I should say. So that's something worth considering. I do find the ergos on this knife are totally usable. It's one of those things where if you carry this knife a couple of times, or even if you've had it in your pocket for a whole day and you've cut a few things with it, you get used to very quickly where everything is on it, and it becomes intuitive to use it then. But if you're used to more standard knives at first, then there is some adjustment that needs to take place. What else is worth mentioning on this one? I guess, for me, the way this carries is part of why it made it in pocket so much when I had it. It was really fidget factor and how well it carried. The cutting performance was very good, but I've got other knives that cut as well as this, and I did at the time too. The blade steel is S30V, so it's not like an exciting, crazy super steel or anything, but it's fine. The materials are all okay to me. If I had another one, I'd swap these scales real quick, that's for sure. But the way it carries really was a big draw for me, because the profile of it is just so slim in this direction. The thickness this way, it doesn't feel like they've intentionally made this a super thin knife, but it's also not overly thick. It's just, it feels about as thick as like a PM2 does to me in pocket. And it's really this profile that makes it such a breeze in pocket. And when I had my deep carry clip on mine, it carried perfectly deep all the way right to the edge of the scale, and so it just had a great presence in pocket. It's very comfortable to carry. It's a great size for me as a primary. This is like the right amount of size and weight for me to have front right pocket and be the knife that I pull out to do typical tasks. It's funny, just playing with this over the last couple of days, I'm like, maybe I should seek out one of those 20CV exclusives. They sold out a while ago, so I'd have to find one secondary, but I hope there's more sprint runs and exclusives of the Smock, because the Smock is a knife I can pretty confidently say I will own again. It's one of my favorite Spydercos that I've owned and no longer have, for sure. It's a really fun knife, and for how fun it is, it carries well, it's pretty usable. The ergos aren't my favorite in the world, but they're good enough for me. Like, in this grip, they really are pretty great. In the other grips, it starts to fall apart a little bit. It's a little weird because you're playing with a different mechanism and a different shape than is common for Spyderco and knives in general. So I guess that's kind of all my thoughts on it. I apologize, it's a little bit scattered and all over the place, but it's interesting reviewing a knife, partially from memory, but also having one in hand. It's a different process than having just like carried and used this for a week to prepare for it. But I have very fond memories of the Smock. I really did enjoy the knife, and I miss it. I do miss it, and like I said, it's one that I most likely will have again before too long here. Let's keep our fingers crossed for a cool sprint run or exclusive, because this is a great platform for it, I think. And yeah, I don't know many people who've tried the Smock and didn't like it. If they did, the usual complaint I hear is the ergos. So for me, the ergos work pretty well, but it is different ergonomically than a PM2 or a Pair 3 or a Shaman or the kind of core Spyderco models for sure. And it should be. It's not designed by Spyderco. It's designed by Smock. So there you have it. That'll be my full review on the Spyderco Smock. Maybe it's a little bit of a different take than you're used to seeing on this knife. I know there's a lot of reviews out there already, but it's a model I definitely like, and I'm glad I got to play with one again. It fueled the fire for me wanting to get another one.